Hi, this is going to be our presentation on types of photography. Now, when we talk about types of photography, for the most part, it is an understanding of all the different kinds of photography and breaking it down to different kind of like subcategories. The one thing about types of photography is that each one of these types will actually kind of connect back to a career, which is pretty cool. Because I want you to remember that every type of photography that you see is actually taken by a photographer, and that photographer is probably paid for it. So you see photography everywhere, like obviously on your phone, but you also see it like when you go to the doctor's office or when you look at a magazine, or think about all those cereal boxes that you have at your house. Everything has photographs on it, and there was a photographer that took it and probably got paid for it. So, major categories we're going to talk about. The first one, and you should have, I'm just going to warn you now, you should have your notes ready. And what I mean by that is you should have printed or gotten like a notebook or something to write down the notes for each of these categories. And I'll point out the things that are most important. But the first category or type that we're going to be talking about is called photojournalism. Now, photojournalism, and you can write down what you see in front of you. Photojournalism itself is a way of telling a story in a single picture. And most photojournalists will work for like a magazine or a newspaper, but some of them actually even work on their own. And they'll work for something called like Associated Press, and they'll take their pictures and put it up for people to then pay them for that. Some of them will work specifically for a magazine, and they'll be in charge of, I don't know, like the sports section, and they'll just travel with sports teams. So it's a very unique position, and that from that becomes very unique images. So it's a form of journalism created by images in order to tell a news story. Each photo either supports a story or can tell a story all on its own. And this year, this is probably one of the most famous photojournalistic photographs. Have any of you seen this picture before? Have you seen this picture before?
No.
No, you haven't. Some of you may have seen this picture in your history class, but this is a great example of photojournalism, because the one thing about photojournalists is that you need to capture the moment as it truly is. You can't use your bias, or you can't be subjective. You can't change the truth. So this is an image of a woman. This is taken during the Great Depression in the Dust Bowl. At that time, what was going on is that there was a huge drought that went on for a great amount of time, and farmers had to find work elsewhere. So a lot of the men had to leave their families and travel cross country to do different kinds of work. Some of them had to just leave their farms. Some of them ended up actually selling all their land. And then in the aftermath, what was going on is the women and the children had to be left behind, and they started forming these small communes together. And in these communes, they would help support each other, feed each other. But this is a mother that was in one of these communes with her children, and you can just see the strife and the issues that she was having with her moment in her life. And if you look carefully, I mean, one of the first times I saw this picture, obviously you kind of gravitate right to her face, but you can't, there's also her children, and she's actually holding another child. There's a baby there. There's a baby that she's holding. So this is a great example of photojournalism. I'm going to show you this picture. Now, when you look at this picture, I want you to tell me, what does this picture make you feel? What do you feel when you see this picture?
Loss.
Okay.
And there's just been a battle, maybe. There are bullets scattered everywhere.
Okay.
There's no movement.
Is this an optimistic picture?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think you would see this picture on the front of a brochure to join the army?
I hope not.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to feel you out. So this image here. Let me ask you.
Mhm.
Well, do you think this is? How does this image make you feel?
Makes me feel interested
In
what's happening.
Okay. I mean, would you say that this is a positive image or more of a negative image?
Negative.
Right. Now, the one thing I want to argue with you is that um would you call this photojournalism or not? Okay, and why do you say that?
It looks pretty biased to me
How is that?
because it's taken from that angle of like
Oh.
the bullets scattered around and like all sad and depressing. There's the only dude there. It just doesn't seem real.
You're absolutely right. So, this is not good photojournalism. And I can tell you that because of the choices the photographer made when they were taking it. The photographer chose specifically to be at a low angle. The photographer chose to specifically have those bullet casings in front. And I don't want to assume anything, but they seem very blatant, almost placed. But I don't want to assume that. The other thing I think that is very kind of altered or changed to kind of go along with some other bias opinion is the coloring. The coloring has been changed. It's been altered. It's been what's called desaturated. It's been removed, the saturation of it. And then the one thing that we automatically look at the soldier because it's just something that you automatically will do psychologically, look for the person first. And he's looking down. And we automatically think to ourselves, oh my gosh, he's probably, contemplating what just happened, or he's upset, or he's thinking about his friend that he just lost. But in the reality of the situation, he might be just looking down at his boot and looking at the bug that's crawling on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that he's actually upset. So we decided that this would not be a good image to put on the brochure to join the Army. But when we look at this, if I was the photographer, just a couple different choices, but at that same moment, this image could be completely different. So I could kind of stand up and get those shell casings away from the foreground. I could get the soldier suddenly looking up in the sky instead, maybe looking at the helicopter that's there. He's just randomly looking around and getting more of the blue sky. And then you would have an amazing picture that you would want to see on the front of a brochure for the Army. So this is bad photojournalism. This is very bad photojournalism. And when you're a photojournalist, you have to be very careful how you actually take your pictures because you can't be biased about what you're presenting. The next type of photography I want to talk about is fine art. Now, fine art, for the most part, when you think about it, it's kind of like photo for photo's sake. It's eye candy. It's not selling anything. It's not necessarily going to be in a magazine to talk about the war. It's its own thing. And for the most part in this class, this is the kind of photography we are going to be taking. This is a good example of fine art photography, and we'll get into other reasons why later on in this class, but it's a great photograph. It's using good principles of design, and good elements are there, and the composition overall is really well done. It's using what's called rule of thirds. It's not a portrait, I know that for sure, because I can't really tell who this person is. It's clearly not selling anything, and I really don't know what the story is behind of it. But I wouldn't mind having this on my wall. So it's a good fine art photography or photograph. Next, we're going to get into what's called portrait photography. Now, portrait photography is probably the kind of photography that you come into contact the most. You see them when you get, like, portrait photographers come into our schools and take our pictures. Some of you may have been in weddings, or you have a relative that's a portrait photographer. When we talk about portrait photographer, there's 3 different kind of subcategories that we will talk about. And whenever we talk about portrait photography, the first one is environmental. Environmental is usually taken of the person in a place that better expresses who they are. Okay. Another one is candid. Candid is taken when the person doesn't really know or is unaware that their picture is being taken. I often say that these are the best portraits of people because they're unassuming. They don't have that moment where they kind of change who they are so that they can look better in their photograph. They're just being themselves. And the last one is formal, and formal is probably what most of you have experienced. So those pictures are pictures of people that are taken to make them look good, and they usually have a purpose, meaning like they're for a wedding or to put up on your wall. So I have 3 examples up here of each one of those. So I'm looking at the guy in the red stuff. What do you think that's an example of?
Berries.
Yeah, he is standing in cranberries, but do you think that's environmental, candid, or formal?
Environmental.
It is environmental. So, like you're saying, he's in a cranberry field, actually. So this tells you not only what he looks like, but a lot about who he is, and you can kind of infer a lot about him and his life and what's important to him by a photograph like this. So we have 2 other ones. So the black and white one of the 2, I think they're soccer players. What would that be an example of?
Candid.
Candids are great. One thing I'm going to challenge you with, and this is something that I want you to do, and you're going to be very annoying to all your friends, but this is true, and I'm going to remind you of this assignment, but I want you to start taking lots of candids of the people around you. So the people that you love, your friends, everybody, and they're going to hate it. They're going to hate every second of it. But those are going to be the pictures that you remember and that you love. Like I have a picture of my family at Christmas. And it's that same, regular picture that all of us always have where we're all just lined up and we're sitting like either on a couch or a chair and we're all smiling. And we do those every year. And for me, it's mostly like just a recording of what we look like. Those pictures don't have a lot of meaning to me. But I do have a picture of my grandmother making a pie in the kitchen. That picture I cherish because that's what I think about when I think about who she was and what she did. And it has a lot more meaning. So start taking those pictures that express your memory of the people around you. And most of those are candids. Formal. So formal is going to be that girl against the wall, right? And those are those stereotypical like senior portraits, things like that. The person knows that their picture is being taken and they're usually designed to make them look good. So those are your portraits. Architecture. So architecture is basically any image of a structure or building. And this is a whole nother career path. And this is a hot one too, because any building that's being built, any house that's being sold, any of that, we need pictures, and we need pictures that look good to sell that property or to show that property or show the progress of that property. So again, architecture is basically an image of a building or structure. And when I say structure, it could be bridges or it could be anything that is like a statue or something like that, something that cannot move. And sometimes they're taken, like I said, to sell, but sometimes they're actually taken to promote the item, or they're there to show the alterations in time. Now, my other assignment for you has to do with architecture and photography. So architecture, photography is one of the best ways to start every time. The coolest thing is that architecture does not move unless it's a really bad day. But architecture will not move. And some architecture is just amazing. And you can change your angle. You can look up, you can look down, you can look for the light, you can get in close, you can get farther away, you can look for reflections. But it's a great way to really hone your skills and challenge yourself and make these amazing images that anyone would want to see. So start with architecture. Still life photography. Still life photography is something that you see a lot of. So some of the images I was talking about, like those images like on your cereal box, or maybe that image of those pair of shoes that you've been kind of drooling over, most of that is still life photography. So still life photography, though, there's some things that I really need you to understand about still life. So still life is a picture of a non-moving object in a place that's completely staged and controlled, and it's always done in a studio. You would not primarily ever do a still life outside in the grass because things can move, the light can change. Now, still life photography, I say that this is like a control freak's dream. This is one of the types of photography that I used to do when I worked. So if I needed to take a picture, and mostly it was products, I would have to take pictures of products for the people that I was working with that had to sell those products. So I would make that product look as good as it could humanly look. And the cool thing that I liked about it is I could take that picture at 9 in the morning, or if I felt like it, I could take it at 2 in the morning. I could do that whenever I wanted. And I didn't have to wait for life. I could make that moment happen for me. So I could stage everything. I could control the lights, the background, the angle that I shot it. So I loved it. I loved that kind of photography because I could control it. I didn't have to worry about being like a photojournalist and waiting for that moment to come up. I could make that moment happen. So you see still life photography a lot more than you actually think. Special effects. Now, this is one of the ones that I like to talk about a lot. So special effects photography can be done in different ways. It's kind of thinking that next level. So it's taking an image in an abstract and interesting way. It could be something called forced perspective, or you can use camera techniques and lighting, or you can use Photoshop. And like I said, in this class, we'll learn enough in Photoshop just to be dangerous. But I want to ask you a couple different questions, okay? So these are all special effects things, but I will say there's only one photograph in this film class that we could not take. Which one is it? Which one do you think would be something we could not do? It's okay to be wrong. The one. So that's correct. So Owen here is saying the one in the bottom right-hand corner, the one with the atomic bomb. Yes! That would be Photoshop, unless it's a really, really bad day. I don't know. But that would be something that we could not do. Now, two of these other ones are using an effect called forced perspective. Which two do you think are using something called forced perspective?
The one with the hand and the one with the dude eating someone.
Yeah, so the hand and the guy eating the girl. Yes. So forced perspective is forcing the perspective of your viewer. When you are a photographer, one of the coolest things is that you are forcing the viewer to see exactly what you want them to see. Everything that's within that frame is the only thing that they have, and it's the only thing that informs what they're seeing. So in any of these images, there's probably a lot of other things going on to the top and bottom, left and right, but I don't know that, and my mind just kind of fills in the blanks. So forced perspective can really mess with people, and it's really fun. So the one with the hand, I'm going to ask you, and it's okay if you don't know, how do you think they took the one with the hand and the girl hanging from it?
They just kind of used a shadow, and she jumped up and tried to grab onto it. Shot the picture.
You were half right. So Owen was saying that there's a big shadow. Do you? And then she jumped up. What are you thinking
She's
now?
actually laying down.
She is.
Yeah.
She's actually laying down. And so the shadow is created. So I want you to kind of imagine this. There's a light, and it's far away from the character, the person. The light but there's a hand right in front of that light, making a large hand shadow. Now, instead of annoyingly asking this girl to keep jumping, right, and then you have to make sure that it's lined up and she looks good, that's a lot of work, and it'd probably take a lot of shots to make sure it's lined up. So what you do instead is you change your perspective. She's laying down on the ground. we're taking the picture from above. And we're probably moving the hand into the proper position so it looks like she's hanging. So again, this is forced perspective. Forced perspective. The one with the guy's kind of looks like he's about to drop the girl into his mouth, that's forced perspective. And this uses something else that photography is very unique with, is that we live in a three-dimensional world. So we have height, width, and depth. But as soon as you take a picture, it doesn't matter what kind of picture you're taking, as soon as you take a picture, everything gets flattened into 2 dimensions. So what's far away can look like it's closer. So that picture is taken in a way where the lady is way out far on the beach, and the photographer just used their kind of angle to make sure everything is lined up. Now, the one with the hands, you can do this in Photoshop, but we can actually do this in the darkroom. This is called a double exposure. This is a way that you can overlap your negatives if you want to, or you can expose your paper in one area, block it, and then re-expose the other area. So this is a lot of fun, and this is something we can do in the darkroom. Collage, I'll just kind of go through this one pretty quickly, but it's kind of what you would expect. It's images put together in an interesting way. It could be narrative. It could just be beautiful. You can use it by cutting and assembling, or you could do this in Photoshop, but it's just a grouping of images put together in an interesting way. Now, advertising photography. This is probably what you see the most. Advertising photography can be still life. It can be portrait. It can have those other kind of genres or themes or types underneath it. But usually it's used to make everything look really good or enticing. Now, I'm going to show you this picture. I know clearly as soon as you see it, it looks like an old ad, for sure. But I want you to really look at it. And remember, when you usually look at an advertisement, what happens is that you look at it under 30 seconds. You look at it for only like about 5 seconds. And then mentally you decide for yourself, am I going to buy this? Am I not going to buy this? So what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this. I want you to kind of ask yourself, what is weird about this picture? What is weird about this picture?
It's in the middle of like what you'd assume to be like a wine tasting
Yes.
thing.
Which is really weird. So like Owen was saying, it looks like it's this supposed to be like a wine bottle instead of a Coca-Cola bottle,
Yeah.
right? Which is supposed to imply that it's classy, like it's expensive, like only elite drink it. Those are all things I do not think about Coca-Cola.
Right, yeah.
Other things that students have said, and I agree with them, is the fact that it's implying that it's healthy. It is not healthy. It's basically sugar water. Now, is there anything else that's weird that you notice in here? Anything else? There are a lot of weird things in this picture. A lot.
Description?
Maybe kind of like the placement of it. But these are probably, the funny thing is, the things I'm going to point out to you, you're so used to seeing, you're not even going to realize that it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
So look at the bottle. If you look at the bottle, it's got that sweat on it that we always see in every drink ad. And I want you to understand why it happens. So that's called condensation. Condensation occurs when the drink on the inside is nice and cool. And then, but the weather outside or the heat or whatever, the temperature of the air outside of it is hot. So if you look at this, that's telling me immediately that this room full of fruit and cheese is really hot, probably about 100 degrees. Weird. That doesn't make any sense to me. But the Coke is nice and cool. The reason every drink ad has that is that we have been conditioned to understand that when we see condensation, we are thirsty. So as soon as you see that, you want to drink it because it's cool and it must be hot out. So we've been conditioned to understand when we see that. The other thing that's kind of weird is that little cup that's next to it, the ice is literally overflowing and it's full. And the bottle that the Coke supposedly came from is still full. So none of that makes any sense. If I were to just pick up that cup, it would just spill all over the place. So I need you to understand, and I want you to look at some of the ads that you see and look at these weird subliminal tricks that they have to change how you feel about a product and entice you. And whether it's true or not, it's usually not, right? They're just trying to do psychological tricks to make you want this item. And here's another example. Look at all that condensation, right? And then there's that word desire at the bottom. There's no reason to put that in there except to make you want that. Time-lapse photography. So time-lapse photography is a technique where the frequency at which film frames are captured is much lower than that used to view the sequence. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. Like a lot of your cameras actually do this too. You can take multiple pictures, and your cameras will usually put it together like in a video. You can also take it where you have a time-lapse image in one shot. So if you think about those beautiful shots with the stars streaking across the sky, that's another example of a time-lapse photography. Aerial photography, it's exactly what you would think. It's something where it's taken from above. And again, this is a whole nother career. This is a whole nother career. And a lot of real estate agents need this. A lot of different developers need this. And if you are good with a drone, you can definitely have this as a career. It's also beautiful. So aerial photography. Action. This is something else that you probably see a lot of. Now, action photography can be taken in 3 different ways. An action is usually a photograph that is of an object. I should go back. So photos that capture motion. And it could be of an object, a person, whatever is moving. But there are 3 ways of capturing action. And I have them up here. The first one is a freeze frame. The second one is a pan. And the third one is a blur. Which one do you think is the freeze frame? Which one is that?
The basketball.
The basketball player. So the basketball player. So that is a freeze frame. Everything is frozen. And when you are a sports photographer, this is what you usually take. Sports photographers are amazing at their craft. They know exactly how to control their camera because time will not wait for them. And the other thing that's really interesting is that when you take a freeze frame shot, your shutter, that little door that needs to open and close, that little door needs to open super fast. And what I mean by that is like 1 fraction of a second, like 1/2000th of a second or something like that. So having said that, only lets in a little teeny little bit of light. So you also need to make sure that you're evaluating your light and changing your aperture. And usually in these different places where they're taking pictures, it may seem bright, but they're actually not that bright considering compared to like being outside in the sun. So that's a freeze frame. So freezing the action. Freezing the action. Looks like nothing is moving. That's your definition. We also have pan and blur. So what do you think is pan? Which one do you think is pan?
The birds.
No. So the birds is actually blur. Now blur occurs when your shutter or that door is open longer. So what happens in the moment that that door is open, the object is moving and has been in different places within that moment of that door being open. So you get multiple impressions on your film or on your camera's sensor of where that object or animal or whatever it is has been. So in effect, in the end, it ends up looking like a blur. So if you look at that bird, you can see the different steps it took from where it started and then where it ended in that moment when the shutter was open and closed. The other bird appears still because it didn't move. But you can see its tail did a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, that means the last one is pan. So pan is a process of when you take a picture, but you move with the moving object. So when you move with the moving object, the object that's actually moving seems to be still because you're getting multiple impressions of that object relatively in the same place in your monitor, but everything else got multiple impressions in different places. So pan, you usually set your shutter for like 1/30th of a second, which still seems fast, but it's enough for you to just pivot. and it ends up having a very cool effect. But that's pan. So pan is moving with the object. And blur is when the objects appear blurred because of the motion. And then convenience photography. Convenience photography is what probably a lot of you take. You're taking a picture, usually on your phone, but you're not thinking about like your composition. You're not thinking specifically about this picture is going to be on a museum wall. You're usually taking a picture just to record that moment so other people know that you were there. So it's very spontaneous. So you're conveniently taking a picture. And the last one I want to talk about is event photography. Now, these are the people that you probably have come in contact with the most. These are the people that are at weddings and at festivals. These are the people that take your picture, like for senior portraits, things like that. This is camera for hire. So this is a career that you can have, and it's honestly where a lot of photographers start. But a lot of the photographers kind of move on from that into different realms that are more specific to different things. So this is a field I would never really want, because there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure, especially for wedding photographers. You can't ask the bride and groom, can you do that one more time? It's not going to happen. But it's a great career. So that is the last one. So what we will be doing when we're back together again is we will review some of these types, but I want you to use this presentation to inform your project.